In 1976, Edna Lewis published The Taste of Country Cooking. This cookbook would propel Lewis to be known as the Julia Child of Southern cuisine. The Taste of Country Cooking documents her childhood in Freetown, Virginia, a farming community founded by formerly enslaved African Americans, including her great-grandfather. Today, I will be making her biscuit recipe, which is featured in many of the meals throughout the book. The book is organized by meals the community would have throughout the seasons, including fall breakfast before a day of hunting and an early spring dinner after sheep shearing. While Lewis had no intentions of her book being political, it deserves to be viewed through a political lens in order to view it as what it really is: activism through nostalgic cooking. Cooking is a way of creating an understanding of Lewis's racial existence in a non-threatening way. Protests can be overwhelming and dangerous, while biscuits simply warm one's belly. However, through the biscuit-making process, the maker has now stepped into Lewis's shoes, making something that was a staple in her Black community. Without realizing it, biscuits have now become a tactile way in racial understanding by symbolically and literally breaking bread. Throughout these recipes, Lewis would include stories about when her family would eat these specific meals, like after sheep shearing or mushroom hunting. She would also include stories of the work going into these meals, such as finding asparagus alongside the fences, or her mother making butter for hours with wooden paddles. She tells her family stories and gives them credence in a time where not only pre-made food mixes were the preference, but also while basic civil rights were denied to African Americans. Lewis also teaches about respecting the food and the land. She believes that all food is temporal and should be savored when its peak comes around. Lewis even believed that there was a prime season to make fried chicken, just like there is a season for fruits and vegetables. In the late spring, the chickens are just the right size for frying, according to Lewis. Since this time only comes by once a year, she prepares the dish with great care. She patiently fries the chicken in a shallow pan, slowly turning the meat in a combination of lard, butter, and country ham for flavor. This technique differs greatly from the popularized fried chicken fast food restaurants that exist today, that heavily rely on fat and salt for the flavor of their bird. They prepare theirs by simply throwing it into the deep fat fryer and keeping it sitting under a heat lamp. That is not how you give thanks to not only the bird, but also the land for providing it. In addition, the fried chicken fast food chain, Popeyes, uses the motif of the serving African American woman to sell their fried chicken, a modern version of Aunt Jemima. Combining the hastily prepared fried food to the imagery of the African American creates a mistaken ideology that African American Southern food is shallow and without thought, completely obscuring the entire history of the African American chef and specifically what Edna Lewis stands for. Lewis's book creates a unique scenario where the reader is enviable of the formerly enslaved. Her mindful descriptions create a sense of utopia for this former town. Here is an excerpt from her section on coffee. Coffee, or Java, as we called it. The smell of coffee cooking was a reason for growing up, because children were never allowed to have it, and nothing haunted the nostrils all the way out to the barn as did the aroma of boiling coffee. The decision about coffee was clear and definite, and a cook's ability to make good coffee was one of her highest accomplishments. Mother made real good coffee, but some mornings my father would saddle the horse and ride more than a mile up the road to have his second cup with his cousin Sally, who made the best coffee ever. Morning was incomplete without that cup of well-boiled coffee with cream from overnight milk, which was stirred in to make a mocha-colored kind of coffee syllabub. The froth on the coffee was quickly chased around the cup with a spoon and spooned into the mouth before it vanished. It was said that this froth signified unexpected money coming to the one who drank the coffee. Coffee went well with hot breads, butter, and meats with gravies. Her reminiscing continues for 2 pages, a decent amount of space for a simple recipe. Why even is there a recipe? Anyone can make coffee. However, this shows how Lewis gives importance to the everyday item. A simple beverage of hot water, coffee beans, and a few grains of salt deserves 2 pages. In Lewis's experience, culture could be found in chats over coffee. Served so hot, one had to save breath to cool the steaming cup. What was interesting was looking at articles in newspapers about Lewis and seeing how a Black female chef is reported on. In 1979, an article was featured in the New York Times featuring Lewis's chocolate souffle recipe. Before Lewis became a cookbook author, she was a chef and co-owner at Cafe Nicholson, a restaurant in New York City that hosted guests such as Tennessee Williams and Truman Capote. It was at Cafe Nicholson where she featured chocolate souffle on the menu. However, the image featured in the article is one of a cartoonish white male chef featuring a towering chef's hat, as well as a cliched twisty French mustache. He is the one holding the mentioned chocolate souffle, not Lewis, reaffirming expectations that chefs are white men. The souffle was so delicious that when William Faulkner tried it when he was visiting the restaurant, it prompted him to ask her if she had learned to make this recipe while she was trained in Paris. She was never trained to cook in Paris. She learned to make chocolate souffle from her mother in Freetown. So while the souffle may be French in origin, Lewis learned it in Freetown without any assistance from white people. This brings into question what makes a dish black or white. Lewis does in fact feature the souffle in her 3rd cookbook, In the Pursuit of Flavor. This book continues the theme of the taste of country cooking by featuring recipes from her youth, demonstrating how a chocolate souffle was a part of her Freetown community. However, the societal perception is that a souffle is a white European dish, which is demonstrated in the choice of illustration from the article. According to society, Lewis has no claim over a chocolate souffle, yet this dish is a part of her childhood community and, in effect, her identity. Lewis broke the silence forced onto African Americans, specifically women. Lewis embraced her race by not only cooking food from her heritage, but also presenting herself by standing tall and often wearing African fabrics. Rather than succumb to the expected cooking and hospitality norms, Lewis stood her ground, paving the way for future African American chefs to succeed with their authentic selves.